We have our form.
Mhm.
Start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Start with Shannon's agreed to be our recording secretary for the evening. Thank you, Shannon. And we just need to approve the minutes for August 7th.
Yeah.
Motion.
Yeah, I didn't receive any
I
comments.
didn't see any comments. Is anybody, everybody's good with the minutes? Yourself? Yep. Can I have a second?
Second,
All in favor? Aye, so approved. Our clear application letter, we need to formalize it as well. I think it was appropriate the way we had it drafted. It went to the planning board. They've accepted it as our
it's our letter.
letter for final approval. So,
Motion to approve.
and second, all in favor? Aye, so approved. Thank you.
And so I will put that into final form. I'll put both the minutes and the application into final form, and I'll email that to you so you can forward it on to the planning board.
Thank you so much. Hello there. We only just started. We've not done anything too serious, I promise. But we do have cookies.
And we clarified that jam is coming.
And jam is coming, so.
The holiday gift will be a little early this year.
All right, and then moving on to the CSC update, which I don't think we really have any update on that. Our main thing that we are working on is the water overlay protection for the village, which we've got a new map of that to show the parcels that are a part of the law, water protection law, which I don't know the name. It's the 1972.
1988.
Something, sorry, but someday we'll stick in my head.
It's got a number on it.
Yeah.
I would never remember. It's got 112 dash. something.
Yeah, that's what I think. It's that's the number that sticks with me. It's like, I think it's the date, but, and we're gonna forward that to, all the boards, and then have one printed up. I hope they have it here because it's very useful to see where the parcels are as a part of that protection as well.
That's a state law, by the way.
It is a state law. So it's just easier for people to know that their property is in that protection zone. So that's what we're up to with the CSC at the moment. And
Going back to clear for a second, I have the hard copy of the application, the big plastic bag. So should I just hold on to that?
yeah, that was Susan Meany's copy, so I could leave it in the planning board mailbox if you want.
Yeah,
Unless you wanna
I
hold
mean,
it.
I've
Can you hold
got,
it for a while.
I either can hold
In case
it,
we need it.
I can either hold it or give it back, whatever
Hold
makes
it for
sense.
now. I don't
Okay,
think it's gonna, I think it's sticking with us for a while.
okay.
All right, so then we'll go to the new business, which is the planning board ZBA, which is very busy. Oh, yeah, it's you. And you had your update, which was very nice.
Okay,
Thank you for
everybody got
stating that.
this in
Yes.
mail?
Yep,
Got the-
yep, we got
yep,
that in the
I
email, which
reviewed
is
that.
wonderful.
Which
Yeah,
is the
Yes.
one topic.
Mhm.
yep, which is perfect.
All right, so there's not a lot to say about these things. The most interesting one, I think, is the one on the top. And by the way, the date is always 8, not 11.
Mhm.
That's probably the date I counted for this program.
Okay.
And Leslie presented everything, and she talked about our request to them that we would like to have a budget line again, which is where this comes in. I just randomly pulled it out for past years and showed we did have a budget line. They didn't look all about it. There was nothing new.
Mhm.
And explained to them along with Leslie the fact that if we don't use the budget or all of it, it just goes back into the fund, so it's not lost money every year. And they seem pretty much okay with it. If I remember correctly, a couple of the board members said, yeah, that's fine. And if you need more money, you have to come to us to ask for more money, but you'll have that line in the budget if it's approved.
Mhm.
And Gary said at the time, which was way back on the 8th, was waiting for a letter. Margaret probably took care of that.
I sent it. right after the meeting, I think.
He was very interested, wanted to send the letter to verify. He said, oh, that's fine, and he wanted the letter. And I think we're gonna be good on that, I hope we are. I mean, it's past practice, the reason why we shouldn't have a big amount of money. And that was the main thing that happened at that particular meeting, that town board meeting. Now, move on to the ZBA. The ZBA board meeting did not take place, so there's very little to report. The interesting thing, however, is that long-serving chair, John Parisi, retired. So we now have Frank Rettle as a replacement. Frank Rettle, in case you didn't know, the lawyer himself, he worked with the Tipsy a while back. I know he's done a lot of the detailed work anyway on the board. He helped out John Parisi quite a bit, so that should be a smooth transition. Won't see any trouble there for us. Normally, we have very little to do with them unless there's a wetland involved somehow. Otherwise, it's just, how much of a variance that we give them and perform or stuff. So occasionally something does come up that they want to vary and it involves a wetland area. And then, we have something to say in that area with that. Now, the interesting one was yesterday.
So before you move on to
Question
the
on
planning
that.
board, you also circulated, or somebody circulated a judicial opinion in connection with the pool.
Yeah, that came from the
Oh, yes, that's
And which
secretary.
that was,
which I thought had some very interesting and binding language
Yeah.
on the 25% rule that we end up
Yeah.
being concerned
I didn't
with.
put it in there because it was not discussed at their meeting yet.
But
There is a, as you
Yeah,
pointed
the-
out,
yeah.
a decision.
or thing. So
Yeah.
so I printed out a copy of that for our files because we
Yeah.
now have a binding interpretation of that section to the
Yeah.
to the extent it comes up again.
Yeah.
I figured you'd enjoy that one.
I did.
It was-
I did all the legalese. Yes,
Yeah, it was interesting, yeah. I read that
Okay.
right up here, sorry.
that was it.
Okay, so unofficially, it is not come in front of the ZBA to the public yet because they didn't meet. But it probably doesn't have to come to the public. I'm not sure about that. as a
I mean,
technical point.
Yeah, I don't know if it does. It's a public document, so.
So, question for you, I'm not sure if I know the answer. Do they have a right to appeal that still? Is there like a 60-day window still for appeals of that decision?
It's possible.
I
I
think
would.
it's like 30 days on
Yeah,
it.
30, whatever
yeah,
the one is.
I assume they have a right of appeal.
That'll be interesting to see if Cornell appeals that or not. But what it is, I mean, it's very close to his property. I mean, most people would not want a swimming pool within 14 feet of their boundary on a very small piece of property next to them, and they don't have a big piece of property that they're close to the boundary too. So he may appeal it still because it does impact him quite a bit. So we'll see what happens.
See what happens.
If it comes back to playing ZBA again or not, or it just stays in the courts.
Mm.
But it's good to know that Article 78 still exists in the town. Our point, I think, as a committee is to make them aware sometimes that some of their actions on the environment are subject to appeal to court.
Mhm.
Okay, now, the clear application. It's on the town website already. It's on this new, on there. And I would suggest if you have the time that you take a look at it, but it was very hectic. Went back and forth, back and forth. It lasted for about 40 minutes roughly.
Mhm.
It starts around, off the top of my head, bringing the note, around 16 minutes in. Prior to that, it was just a series of applications that had nothing basically to do with us. That what normally happens with the ZBA, that people come in for variances to the ZBA. ZBA says, oh yeah, we'll give you that variance, but in a lot of cases it involves construction, and then they have to go to the planning board to get the site plan approved, and then they go back to the ZBA again. So that's normally what happens, 90% of what the ZBA does, they approve things. And if it's construction, it goes to the planning board, it comes back, so it involves like 3 meetings altogether many times. But they go very quickly, because they approve everything. The clear one, however, is not going very smoothly. It's going, but it's not one of those 1, 2, 3 and done things. As you remember, there was an original application that they withdrew, which was not well done, by the way, environmentally. They then retrenched and hired a very competent firm to do the work for them. And in my personal opinion, the woman who they hired, Van Tool, I think her name is very good.
She's the lawyer, not the scientist.
No, who was presenting the architect, I'm going to call her, I don't know what they're going to
Yes.
call, was presenting for the firm.
Mhm.
Very good. They have their own, as part of that, she had engaged an expert to take a look at the maps. And this is one of the things that we should have the option, in my opinion, how you all feel. I think you feel the same way. Now, some of the town board members may differ. Have a chance to pull on our own personal expert look at something. It's very complicated.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of maps, a lot of overlays, and it would benefit greatly from a professional from our environmental point of view, with no allegiance to the person who owns the property, looking at it as well and making some comments.
Mhm.
The problem is that the architect that they hired is very competent, but when you're hired to somebody and you're making your reports, I assume it's normal to skew the report slightly in favor of your client. Isn't that the general technique and with legal representation? And you use all the facts, but you try to present it in a way that favors your client?
Well, yes, I mean, you're being hired to present a case.
Yes, so that's why I think an independent expert in it sometimes would be very helpful to advise us, at least myself. I'm not going to speak to you. I don't consider myself an expert in some of these areas.
Mhm. But I think one of the things about our letter was that we didn't call for hiring our own expert here, because if you don't subdivide, if you don't, well, go ahead.
Let's call it a consultant.
Right.
Difficult area. This is a
Right.
difficult area.
Mhm.
I think of us to be the final arbitrator.
Right.
Although they were aware of your letter, by the way, the draft.
Okay.
They said we have the draft and we're waiting for the official meeting today. But they were aware, and they did address some of the things in there, among other things. Things like the envelope, the building envelope, for example. It's not clearly defined per se, at least for me. Somebody else might look at it and say, yes, it's clear. But there is a section on the bulk regulations as to how much you can use to build on, which is the building envelope.
Mhm.
It's 10% of what your property is.
Mhm.
So if you have a 19 or 20 acre property, the building envelope would be 2 acres
Mhm.
that you could build on. And so we're saying that we want everything protected in perpetuity outside the building envelope.
And we want that defined, because because right now, at least on the part of the application that we've seen so far, the building envelope was a concept, but you couldn't actually identify it on the map. And that's the other thing we needed to see.
Well,
Yes.
the Susan Mancuso letter, I was wondering where those came from, because it clearly has the building envelopes identified on the map.
I don't know,
I was just shared
Did you all get
today.
the Susan Mancuso letter?
today,
Yes,
today, but I don't, did the applicant submit those?
No.
No, I don't, I think she was,
Susan is a concerned, let's say,
she's,
concerned citizen at the
but that
moment.
would have been hypothetical building envelopes, not actual things that the
That's not
applicant,
how I read that letter.
okay,
I'm curious where they came from. I was gonna
Yeah,
bring
I'm
that up
curious
and
too.
ask.
Well, she's
if we
a
didn't
lawyer,
see 'em.
so she doesn't make stuff up. She gets it somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where that came from myself.
That you have in the bag.
so,
It might be your own stuff that you have, I believe, the NRIs and all the other maps that you can use.
No, I think it,
so the,
No, it's definitely, so she's got, it's very detailed, like complete with access to the road envelope,
So,
building envelope.
so during the planning board meeting, not in September, but in August, the applicants' representatives were very clear that they hadn't fully defined the building envelopes. They very specifically said that they had not drawn where the driveways would go, where the septics would go.
Right.
So
I'm sorry, no.
I don't know.
I think that's.
Yeah, so I was wondering if this was based on, did they update it?
So maybe
The
the application's been updated.
I mean, I've forwarded everybody everything that I've received, and I don't remember seeing anything different yet.
So I have not read,
That was one thing, yeah. that's
Yeah.
what they were-
I have not read the Susan Mancuso letter.
I haven't had time, sorry, I
I
apologize.
could, um,
It just came out, it was just sent to us today.
Well,
Right,
worth
I-
reading if you have time.
Just-
Oh,
read
of
it.
course I will, but I just haven't done it yet.
I know.
Oh, blame you, for God.
yeah, it's not clear where they came from. They're not, I can't find the citation for these, but like,
I
You won't be able to see it from
briefly
there.
saw it, I just,
yeah, I mean,
I just couldn't read it. 'cause it-
I didn't get to the bottom of it, to be honest, there's no
Like-
citations at the
the
bottom.
red is building envelopes, like they're pretty specific.
I mean, that could be a hypothetical building envelope.
The applicants have proposed building envelopes to identify locations for future, and they cite the application.
Maybe they've updated the application. and we're just
Maybe,
not aware of
there's
it.
a lot of stuff on the town website, there's a lot. Maybe that's part of the town website.
Maybe it's been updated and we just don't know that yet.
It says the types of structures that could be included in the building envelope have yet to be determined.
Then there's a question of septic systems and so on being outside the building envelope. Maybe somewhere.
Check the application again.
So that's still, I guess, and they're coming back
Mhm.
again. So we raised the question again about building envelopes, to be defined specifically, that we need to see that at some point. There's not, according to her, what I read today, there's not a lot of building envelopes available because of the steep slopes and soils and so on. And I think on the map, but I look at it on a relatively, not a big map like you guys had in front of me just before, on a much smaller surface, it's hard to tell because the map maybe is so compressed.
Mhm.
So the question is, where would you be able to put septic and so on? Could you put it outside the building envelope? For example, if the building envelope itself is compromised with bad soil or steep slopes. And I'm also, maybe somebody else knows the answer, I'm also curious if the building envelope has to be contiguous or not, or you can put it, break it up into segments. You say, oh, here's the house, that's my building, part of my
Right.
2-acre building envelope, but down here, I want to put something else, and that's totally in a different spot, but it's another building envelope, which would be more negative, in my opinion, because it would break up the environment.
Mhm.
And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe it was defined, maybe that's part of the definition, I just missed it somewhere.
What they, and I don't know if it's looking at a third party's maps, right? But what are shown as the building envelopes in that third party's maps are very much contiguous
Contiguous.
chunks. They're not idealized, right? They're definitely not like this would be the best, because the whole point of this is showing that, there's a steep slope in the middle of one, and so the building envelope's a little bit on this side and a little bit on this side with steep slopes in the middle, or, right, like it's.
Well, the problem is that there's no language saying that, at least I could find saying that. And from a legal standpoint of view, language is sometimes important.
Saying it in the code or in their application?
Anywhere that I look, I personally
agree.
couldn't find
I
that
couldn't
language.
I couldn't find the language either. And what had been presented to date, I'll be interested to see what Susan has to say.
And then sometimes you get the opinion from the town lawyer. which I think to me falls into the same category of and everything they skew the negotiations slightly to what the client would like in the presentation. The town lawyer represents the town, what he thinks is in the best interest of the town. And that's a political decision sometimes, in some cases. We, I think, represent the environment. They have a slightly different opinion sometimes on the same evidence. But the town lawyer was part of that discussion. Now, I don't have trouble writing. I can't write very well with my hands. I couldn't write down everything as quickly as it was said. That's why one of my recommendations, at least for me, I have to listen to that whole thing a couple of times and take notes as it goes along. It was a lot. When you listen to it, you'll see there's a lot of back and forth going on in there. And
So
that went on for about 40 minutes.
Other than finalizing the letter, is there any next steps for us?
They're coming back next month. And put that in there.
Oh,
They'll be
but-
back next month.
But I mean, any other next steps for the CAC?
So Steve Marino's letter, which also references known building envelopes.
Right,
So they're
okay.
definitely out there.
Okay, so I found what it is, where that's from. It took me a few minutes. It's under the clear subdivision plan set. They do have it
Mhm.
on the application. So I did find it. So that is what they're basing that on, I believe.
Well, it's in the town code. The word building envelope is in the town code. That's probably why they
No,
did that.
they have it here though.
There
They
are
do have a
specific
plan set,
mapped plans
set,
for these
yeah.
building envelopes.
which I'm gonna email everybody right now.
They exist.
Since I know it exists now, it must have been in there.
And Marino actually made the suggestion for an expert specifically with regards to the wetland bog turtle habitat. And I couldn't tell from the language in the very most recent email whether or not last night they
Yeah.
talked about Marino being part of that reevaluation.
Yes.
So the expert that he's suggesting is hired is going to be him?
I don't remember at the moment, to be honest, but Marino did reference the expert somewhere.
Yeah, so what our letter says is that the building envelope should have more specificity to reflect driveways, septic, and all other possible land disturbances. So what they said in the meeting was that the building envelopes described on the application weren't final. Because they didn't reflect the septics and the driveway. So we need to see where they would be.
Okay, so we're all agreed, I think the building envelope definitely came up last night. It's definitely very important. What they're going, the other part that came up, it's two things. One, I'm gonna jump around a little bit so far I forget. The other thing that came up in terms of the building envelopes and the right to subdivide, and that came up as well, the in perpetuity language, that once they make these 5 parcels and they make the decisions on them, it stays forever. The clear people push back on that.
Of course, yeah.
And they said that there's something in the code which they had used for the Johnson & Johnson estate, that it is only good for 10 years, and then you can go ahead and work on that parcel, but apply for subdivision and so on. The clear people wanted that too.
Yeah, and
Once you decided, yes, that you could have it, it was left open for discussion, if I recall correctly. This is again why I'm recommending that people listen to that thing very carefully, because you can pick up a lot of stuff that I missed. There's a lot going on in there. What else came up here? Okay, Marino talked about the bog turtle. And I was trying to look it up on the internet quickly today to see if there's any firm code on this bog turtle business. I remember one time I was at a training session a while back, and people were asking, where is the bog turtle? And they said, we're not telling you, the presenters. Because if we tell you where it is, somebody will come in there and try and collect it.
Yeah.
And that was an official meeting of training New York State. So the question is, if they go in there, I just raised the question briefly, I didn't get an answer. If they go in there and they find the bog turtle, are they going to put that in the report, the public report, that there's a bog turtle, low habitat with active bog turtle located on this property? And the reason why that's important is, according to Aaron, if it's just a bog turtle piece of property that's suitable, it'll only get a 100-foot buffer. If it's active, it will get a 300-foot buffer, which didn't make any sense to me personally. If it's bog turtle property, it should get the proper buffer, because they're not telling anybody where it is anyway. He said, "Oh, they'll say something." He said, I don't know. I mean, that's not what I was told, that they don't make those things public. Marina will go in there, but they're also, their expert will go in there and look for the bog turtle habitat, if there's any active evidence. So that came up, and then the Indiana bat one came up, which I always find absurd. It's almost counterproductive. Indiana bats, another type of bat, they nest in trees. So if you find them nesting in trees, that means, of course, they're there. So what do? You wait till they leave if you're the property owner. And then they're not there on the property anymore. Then you cut all the trees down. So then they come back next year, and there's no trees for them. And that's what they'll do with the bat thing. They find the bat thing. Whoever owns the property can't cut the trees down in the season when the Indiana bats or whatever other, there's two types of bats are active, but they cut them down afterwards. So it's almost a moot point in a way. But the bog turtle one isn't. The bog turtle one is a pretty definite piece of legislation. I think that was it, except the other one was that I found interesting was the 10-year thing. Does that apply, or could we say in perpetuity? You have to protect this property because it's so
You can
valuable.
always say in perpetuity, you always can, there's no requirement. The 10-year can be overridden.
That's what I think they were saying, clear people were saying, that they could override it in 10 years if it wasn't even put in place in the first place.
No, I mean, in other words, you could have perpetuity.
Oh, you're saying
Yes,
perpetuity?
yes. In other words, there's no requirement. There's no absolute requirement to have something revisited after 10 years. The planning board can impose a restriction that's more restrictive than what's in the code.
I have a legal question for you then. One of the things I did when I was actively working a long time ago, I negotiated contracts for the union. Our health clause for retirees, they wanted to drop it out of the contract because it cost them more money. And we put the language in perpetuity in there, that if you retire under this, it stays in perpetuity. And it's still in there, by the way. However, there was a legal opinion someplace that previous planning boards, school boards rather, cannot be bound by the present school boards, cannot be bound by the decision of previous school boards. And it never got challenged, but it came up. So I'm wondering to myself, if we put in there in perpetuity from this town board, that some lawyer could come along from a parcel owner and represent that was not done by the present town board.
The idea would be to attach it as an attachment to the land, a covenant that runs with the land. I mean, it's pretty
They can't
easy
use
to
the
do.
argument that I.
No, because it's real property. It's different.
Which was in New York State, someplace on the t-shirt.
There's no absolute right to subdivide. And so the planning board has got a lot of leeway as to what conditions it can attach if it grants a subdivision right. But whether or not they will do that is something. I mean, they have to balance a lot of factors.
Now, the other thing is, since this is becoming a public hearing at some point, do we need to get permission to send in a letter, a reference point? Of course, it's now a public hearing. Could we just simply send in a letter to CAC?
But isn't this the letter?
No, we'll have that one. But I mean, there are going to be some changes probably at the next meeting.
Okay, well, we'll take a look at whatever changes are.
We have to see what changes
But
there are.
my question is, do they have to refer to the CAC again? I don't know. I assume they do.
that will depend on what the changes are, right? If they're significant, they'll need another CAC
Significant is
referral.
that the eye of the beholder with these people sometimes. I found that one person seems significant, but some of these boards is not significant sometimes to the board.
I think our position will be that the land outside the building envelopes needs to be permanently protected.
No, that's not my question.
And so if that's our position, then, that's, the application can go through a lot of revisions and our position will still be relevant.
No, that's not my question. I'm assuming we will have relevant stuff, but if they don't refer the new changes to the CAC again, can we still, I think we had, as a public body, we can still send in a letter.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's, talk enough about this. Listen, if you have the time, I again think you'll find the Zoom very interesting.
Oh, absolutely. I plan to.
Just didn't have a chance. All right. Well, thank you very much, Howard. And thanks for sending us the notes because it does make it easier to absorb.
Yeah, a lot easier.
And so, Pam, you have.
Oh, sure.
Yes. For your
So all town employees and board members need to receive a copy of the Code of Ethics and affirm that they're in compliance to the best of their knowledge. And so Howard, Margaret, and I signed at the last CAC meeting, but we didn't have a chance to get from David Shannon. So if you can read it and sign it and return it to me at your convenience, that would be great. Then I can pass it along to the board, to Kristen. Oh, you don't.
Before you leave, it doesn't have to be right now.
Yeah.
All right, so moving along to our open comments and questions portion of our evening, and got any comments, questions, or concerns? Go ahead, Jen.
This is just a comment suggestion. One of the things that we were doing before we decided to focus on the NRI and the CSC was thinking about community forests and intact forest code, potential for protecting the larger swaths of forest with some priority. It seems like we've got the maps now, and certainly the discussions around subdivisions bring up again the importance of thinking about that. Obviously, Walt's not still on the board, but maybe we could think about how to re-energize that.
So we talked about doing an aquifer protection overlay because that's in the zoning code as something that's a defined concept. So the forest, like a forest overlay, would that be like that's not a concept that's really in our zoning code, right? I mean, what would we would we have to start thinking about what kind of protection that would look like, right?
Yeah, where we had left off was.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt there, but there are forestry protection laws in different municipalities in New York State, and that is something that is on the list of things for the town board to consider as part of its more substantive code changes. If that's helpful. Sorry, I thought you were just asking the hypothetical about whether.
No, we're having the general discussion, and I'm just looking at the NRI's forestry map. That's what I was just looking at. So
before where Walt and I had kind of gotten to was Red Hook, for instance, has a very, was my recollection, had a very highly documented community forest program that wasn't just an overlay, but a mission
for the whole
to protect forest in their town.
Okay, so
and we should look at our natural resource inventory map number 15,
Mhm.
large forest. It's actually quite good, and it gives you the whole different conditions of the.
Right.
Don't worry about it.
Well, and so like the Red Hook model or the community forestry model, which New York State has a whole DEC website on how to do this, would take those maps and then develop ways to prioritize not just an overlay of the map, but how would development and protection kind of move forward to maintain some prioritized contiguity.
So a good place to start with this would be a DEC website on community forest.
Would be one place. I mean, there's a lot, right? Because they also have their street trees, they have their, right? But this was particularly what Walt and I kind of had honed in on, was particularly the community forest in the larger towns.
Okay, all right.
Community forestry
So,
programs.
yeah,
in
I'm just
larger
thinking
towns.
about how am I going to educate myself? And that would
Yeah.
be a good place to
So if
start.
everyone,
But don't get bogged into street trees.
A couple of weeks, meetings ago, have something on that too? Remember, there were 2 people or 3
That was the
people?
watershed
That was
folks.
the
and
watershed.
There's nothing
No,
on
No.
forest
No,
or
they
power
didn't.
or anything? Okay.
they had maps, but we have our
But-
maps.
Maps, that's what
Yeah.
I'm for.
don't get me on that one. But so this one, our map, our large forest map, which is quite nice, it actually also shows the parcels that have the 480A forest tax law parcels marked. So I didn't realize that there was this many in our township that are under that. So that's a part of the.
You mean
forest-
that,
So it's a part of the forestry, but you can't forest it,
so like the,
There's a lot in here.
what do they call it? You get like a tax break for saying, I'm not going to cut this
Yeah,
down.
you can,
Usually though, they're like, there's a timeline.
yeah, no, but they're all in the timeline. There's a lot in that timeline.
Yeah.
So.
So
and
the
people-
town would want to prioritize, like, which of these we want to really encourage to go beyond 5 years.
Yeah,
not cut down.
and exactly. So,
Yeah.
but in this map, I'm surprised how many are here. I didn't realize there was this many. I've studied this map once before.
It's a nice tax break, I'm not surprised.
So that's a good one. Thank you, Shannon. We'll bring that up. We'll start researching that again. Less things.
I can share some of the stuff
That'd be
Yeah,
that we
I'm
had
just
started with.
Yeah.
very curious.
Do we have something on a wildlife corridor as well, in that?
So that might be one of the
reasons.
reasons you would prioritize certain habitat.
There is a big
Specifically
wildlife corridor
related to
in
forest.
Sharon, Connecticut.
I think we
And some of
have,
us, we're on that, some of it too.
I think we have it in one of our maps.
That's what I'm asking.
I think we do. Hold on, I'm still looking at maps.
There's a lot of kinds of wildlife, and so
Yeah, so it's part of what we did with the NRI.
there's not going to be one.
Well, it's on a map, it's a
Wait.
continuous area that runs all the way from Westchester, I'm not making up, if I'm saying Westchester, and it runs all the way up. And it's a continuous area that a corridor, they specifically map. And it's an
Which is-
environmental corridor.
The same thing as our contiguous forest map
That's what I'm
that the
asking.
NRI had. Yeah, it's
That's
not
somewhere.
different than that.
I'll continue to study. There's too many maps for me to look at.
On eastern corner.
My recollection was what they told us was that they took the contiguous forest one and then they looked at, like, are the roads passable?
Yes, exactly.
And
Could it be contiguous or?
yeah,
or is
like it wasn't that there wasn't any road,
Right.
but they
Is it
actually
stopping?
looked at them
Is it-
individually.
Is it causing a break
Yeah.
in the pattern? Yeah. Alright, so that's our forward project. Anything else?
No, I have nothing else.
Is aquifer overlay zone something that is on this thinking forward?
I mean, it should be, right? I mean, this is what you're working on with the village as being the first step, but it's potentially broader than just the village aquifer, right?
Mhm.
But that's the focus.
Excuse me. So what we're working on mainly with the village is the water protection source. So which is a little tighter than the aquifer. The aquifers are a little bit further out of that.
This is drinking water protection.
From what my understanding, the evaluation as it was read in that chapter was that the present aquifer overlays really tends to protect more of the sand and gravel areas as opposed to the watershed areas. And there is some differentiation between the two, but I don't know what that differentiation is. And just for your point in history, so you know that there has been an attempt, and Howard's aware of it, back in 2013, Russell Urban Mead came out and
Yeah.
the village had a water committee, and the water committee was supposed to be looking at all aspects of water and drinking resources and whatever. And one of the recommendations was that we check to see if we could work with the town on aquifer protection, potentially beyond what the law had said in 1988. And Russell and me looked at our entire report. He looked at our survey, he looked at everything. We gave a joint report to both the town and the village in 2013. And then the mayor at the time, Early, asked him if he would come in and do a presentation to the town about possibly having the town adopt his model aquifer overlay. Because he had something like that he instituted in Red Hook and in other towns throughout the county. And they listened to his presentation and then showed him the door. They would not interested in any more regulation of the aquifer protection. And that was 2013. They were quite explicit about it. So,
And sort of the footnote to that is we recommended a second area to be purchased as an aquifer protection area for the village water supply.
Yeah.
It was up in the Clinton Corner area or somewhere, I don't remember exactly where. And the village engineer at the time, I don't know if he's still there, said, no, you can drill where you are. You can drill deeper, the deep rock formation where you are, and you can drill there and say you don't need anything else. And that's what they decided to do. And then so the all good intentions sometimes come to an end. They did, and they found it was radioactive rock down there.
Ooh, nice.
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 And so they never purchased the other property at the back of Aquifer.
and that came up when that was 2015.
Wow.
We proposed, and I got a grant through Dutchess County to be able to explore the idea of going deeper in order to avoid being under the influence of groundwater, because that's what our current supply is. It's groundwater. And they went as far as 700 feet and got radon. At which point they said, no, you can't avoid putting in a filtration plant because you'll just be putting it in for beside Cryptosporidia and the other microorganisms that could be a problem that don't necessarily show up. You'd have to have a whole separate screening process for the radiologicals. So that was part of the reason why we built the filtration plant with the conditions we did, because we knew we could get a substitute for the groundwater we presently have without having to go through two buildings, so to speak, of filtrations.
Anything else?
One more thing, sorry. What's the status of new CAC members? Are there people that are we waiting on the town board to contact people and interview them? Are we recruiting? Are we supposed to have more members than
You can have up to 9.
5?
We
Have more members.
We have to have.
I've got questions.
We have to have 3.
Mhm.
We can have up to 9. We are currently in limbo.
We have had more.
So for people who feel like they've applied but haven't heard anything, what is the
If
comment?
they have
What's the
applied,
response?
it's with the town.
I don't think there's been anybody, Shannon, who's applied to my knowledge and hasn't heard anything.
That hasn't heard back.
And if there is, you can forward them
So
Have them read.
to me.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? Last call. I have a motion.
Motion to close.
Second.
Oh, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Night, everyone.
Night.
Good night, Leslie. Thank you.
6:14.